Well, we continue with the broadcast this morning at around 9:30 a.m. and we are now going across to join program director at the Center for Mediation in Africa at the University of Pretoria, Dr. Quraysha Ismail Sooliman. Coming against the background of the student protests, now Quraysha has written a piece talking about the student activist being her hero and to explain why we are now joined by Quraysha Suleiman. Quraysha, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. As always, welcome to the show.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And again, as always, jazakallah for having me.
Quraysha, I know people have different takes on what is playing out, particularly with regard to the students. We see a lot the media focusing on the ugly side of student protests. We see tires burning, we see mayhem, we see rocks, we see innocent people, innocent businesses that are being told to close. Now, that is the part of student strikes that have been repeatedly shown and written about in the media. But there are many underlying issues as far as young people are concerned. And I'm sure this article that you've written, The Student Activist is My Hero, and to explain why. Let's just go through some of the key issues and what prompted you to look at it from this angle.
So, yes, you're absolutely right, Inayat. There is always a focus on the subjective violence of the students, and in most instances, anything that poor people do. Focus ultimately goes to that which is ugly and which is untenable to society for the so-called civilized understanding of society, for an appreciation of, basically the images only come to the fore to show the discomfort of the more well-to-do society, the upper class, middle class people, etc. Nothing about the way in which the news is ever written with regards to poor people ever looks at the plight of poor people. It's simply just words, but ultimately those words are skewed, planted, placed in any kind of a different array of priorities. So ultimately make it look like these people just want to, cause harm, basically burn things, destroy, etc. And they feel that the students don't deserve what it is that they're getting. So that's the message that goes out. But the reality is, of course, you need to always go back, and I do this over and over again, and even in my classroom, there's always a context, and we need to start with the context. That context often refers to the past, but also very much tied with the present because we all have agency in the present. If you look at the student protest, students always start peacefully, everywhere, in every campus. They gather together, they identify a problem, they go to management, they start engaging, they go by the SRC. The SRC is a legitimate body of the university. The SRC investigates the issues, puts forward recommendations, tries to engage the body corpus of the university. So it's not a bunch of students who just decided to come together and suddenly do things. No. They went through their relevant authorities, those authorities that are recognized within the university structure. And then ultimately what happens is that university management, which is very much like our political system, like our dinosaur politicians who run the state at the expense of the goodness of all South African citizens, they don't give a damn. They're only focusing on themselves. They seek to meet the requirements of a particular privileged clientele. Many of them are seeking their own individual acknowledgement, how they're recognized by the international world, the rankings of the university, how they will get those rankings, etc. Ultimately, the university has been commodified. It's no longer a public good. And through this commodification, they are destroying the very futures of our generations to come. They're destroying the future of the current youth in this country. And I think that they're destroying this country altogether. So these are things that you need to keep in mind. And you need to realize that when students are denied the right to access education, to function, to learn, and this happened not only because the students have caused disruptive processes, but because the university and the political system, the current ruling elite, have denied them access to the university. All of that is structural violence. But, unfortunately, the education system is so pathetic in our country that even the journalists that come up, new generation of journalists, and perhaps even the older ones who write these stories, etc., they don't even know about structural violence. Speak to them about violence, and all they can tell you is conflict, guns, burning, things like that. But they don't even know about structural violence. Of course, the most dangerous form of violence is structural violence, systemic violence. And this is what the students are encountering on a daily basis. And that's what my article is about. You guys need to wake up and realize that this is not a bunch of disgruntled individuals just wanting to destroy them because they don't want anything. I mean, I engage with students on a daily basis. If the future was in the hands of the youth, South Africa would be an incredible country. Let me tell you. If the youth were left to run this country, they would do a dynamic job. They are so dynamic, so diverse, so intelligent, visionary, recognize the need and the potential to uplift their communities. You must listen to them. I really, it makes me want to cry sometimes when I hear about their struggle and the things and the visions and the dreams that they have just to uplift themselves. And then here we have, an entire system that was built on apartheid and from colonialism to serve a particular elite, which is continuing and not giving these people the opportunity and the chance to do something better.
Yes, Quraysha, what you're saying is very true because often we hear the youth are our future, but at this point in time, we have a youth that is so demoralized, demotivated because they don't have a future, and this is a major concern. And the dinosaurs that you speak about, and in your article, you even make mention of people like the Minister of Higher Education, Science and Technology, Blade Nzimande, and looking at the politicians, looking at the cabal that you refer to that are destroying the future of this country, its people, and the youth in particular. And we've also seen with the recent cabinet reshuffle, Dr. Dlamini Zuma assuming the responsibility for the youth. Now, these are people that are so out of touch with reality. They are out of touch with what the youth is experiencing, or perhaps they know, but they just refuse to do something about it.
Absolutely, absolutely. When I spoke to my class, I didn't even know they was going to write this article, and the editor just contacted me per chance. And it just so happened that I was teaching the state of citizenship and political participation in a microdynamic perspective, and we looked at political participation in university campuses. And so when I was talking to the students, and I asked them, most of them, what they felt about Blade Demand, and it was an overwhelming no, like, no, these guys need to go. One of the students even came to the front, and while the group of them were talking about exactly as you said, they so disgruntled, they demoralized. Many of them have faced this because at the beginning of the year, but they didn't have money for registration. The friends are still not on campus because they still don't have the money to pay their historic debt, etc., things like that. They, all of them, we were talking amongst themselves, and this one student, she just stood up and she said, "Come on, guys, vote for me, vote for change. And the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to put a cap on the age limit, to which people can participate politically or be elected in particular positions." And I just laughed and I said, perhaps maybe that is our solution, because Africa has the oldest, perhaps in the entire African continent has the oldest leaders, and they are destroying this continent. They're killing it. What if it's not dead already? So the reality is, yes, the youth are very, very disheartened. They feel like there's no hope, etc. And I think it's a job of people like myself and yours who have access to the youth to reignite in them the realization that the power is there. And for the moment, the most important thing is that they need to be active. They need to push back, and more importantly, they need to come out and vote come 2024. It doesn't matter who they vote for, as long as they do not vote, and as long as they do not vote the ANC back into power. That's the two fundamental things that we need to drive amongst the youth, and that's what I'm trying to do.
Exactly, and I think many of these young people have lived through an entire life under a democratic dispensation and a democratic government. I think many of them were not even born when we became a democracy, and 29 years later, they've grown up. They are under a democracy, but a democracy that has actually failed them, Kurisha.
It has failed them totally, but you know what's the worst part? Is that the education system has failed them too. Because although democracy has failed them, our education system is not teaching them about the failures of democratic systems. So today you still have in political science classes in many of the campuses right across the country. The same old academics who teach the Eurocentric perspective teach about this wonderful notions of democracy, etc., liberalism, how fantastic an ideology it is, without critiquing these things. And so students think and are brainwashed into believing that these are the only correct ways, that democracy is the ideal, liberalism is the ideal, etc. And they don't know how to critique. And it suits that. It suits these elites. It suits the people who have these positions to continue this particular mindset, because then you don't create or you don't give birth to or you don't ignite a generation who has the potential to be critical thinkers, who can take the lead, who can bring something forth. So they're just replicating what is being told about them and what is being told to them. And that's a big problem. So when I start unpacking these issues in the class also, I see how the students now are conflicted. And many of them ask me, so ma'am, like, okay, we never thought of it this way. What do we do now? And my first thing is that you need to learn, you need to read. If you look at the folders of 2016, 2015, these were a dynamic bunch of young people. They engaged with decolonial thought. They engaged with the history in the past, with the African thinkers, etc., and they started to learn. 8 years, 9 years down the line, we're back to square zero, basically, if I may put it that way. I feel like the university campuses, especially in those that were more Afrikaans-based, white liberal, UCT, etc., those kind of places, are turning the clock back, going back to the way there's things that they did. So they had this kind of a show, this pretense of wanting to transform and decolonize, etc., but very, very slowly and gradually they're turning the clock back. And I mean, if you see what has happened to Pakeng at UCT, this is orchestrated. I mean, she had a knife in her back from the day she entered the campus, when she was given that basic position, and they were looking for a way to get out. She had a mistake. She has a flaw. She's done things wrong, perhaps, yes, but they were out for her. This bunch of white liberal men, they were out for her from day one, and they got the opportunity and they nailed it, nailed her to the coffin. So there's a big problem. That's what I'm saying, for the future of this country. If we look at the way two things, the state has failed the youth and the education system has failed the youth, and we haven't transformed. And if we're ever going to hope for and wish for something better in this country, we have to make sure that we fight with the youth, we guide them, and we put, wonderful, dynamic people in terms of managing them. Like you said, Lamine Zuma, Ladies Zamane, no. And as Sangeza Zibi himself said, these are rather unremarkable people. They're unremarkable. They have no vision, and they cannot take the country forward. They cannot take the youth forward, and the youth, if left unfettered, they can become destructive. So you need to harness their potential into a very positive way. And to do that, you need positive leadership. But what we have at the moment, that is anything but positive.
Well, Quraysha, and it brings back memories to 1976, where we had an education system an apartheid system that had failed the students, and we've seen the power of the students, the uprising of the students in 1976, and it appears as if history is starting to repeat itself.
Yes, certainly history is, and if I just listen to the pain and the anguish in the voices of the students, it's heartbreaking. And I what is for me the most painful experience is to actually see the disdain with which the university elite, political elite, treat the poor. They really treat them as if they're a nuisance, as if they're a menace to society. They look down on them, and they look disdainfully down on them. And it is really, really heartbreaking. You have to be in that environment. You have to be there to see how they respond to them. And I tell you with all my heart that every student who goes out to protest does not want to protest. They know the cost of protest. They know what is going to happen to them. They know how quickly the university is securitized. But at the same time, they also know that they want to learn. They want to better their lives. And the only way out of the trap, the cycle of poverty that their families are trapped in, generations of them are trapped in, is through education. But in both instances, through the political framework and the landscape, and of course, the university structures, even basic education, it's the press. I mean, Andy should have been gone a long time ago. They are killing the generations. that are going through basic education at the moment. I mean, last week, the 4-year-old child who died in the pit toilet. So basic education and higher education in both instances, the children feel that the only way out is through education, but they're struggling to access it. And despite this, they know they've got to do something. And I really think, I mean, I hear firsthand the fear in their voices. The conscious engagements and arguments that they have inside of their head. Should we not? If we do, this is what will happen. If we don't, this is what will happen. It's a real struggle, and I don't think that the youth should be put through this. Not in this country that has the means to educate the youth. We have the money. I mean, 500 billion has been stolen through state capture up to 2022. How many students could you have educated? How many schools could you have put up? How many pit toilets could you have eradicated with all that you have stolen? It's frustrating, and we have to just keep pushing back. We have to make the youth aware, and where we can, we have to make a difference.
Well, Quraysha, we're going to have to leave it at that. But as always, we do appreciate you taking time out and sharing what you normally do with us and important issues. And we appreciate that. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah Inayat.
Dr. Quraysha Ismail Sooliman with us this morning. We're going to go for a break. We come back, and our focus is going to be on Fordsburg residents without water for more than 8 weeks.